Well, no, I was just going to move on here because yeah, it got me thinking. Talking about processes. You know, when we go into these rebuild scenarios, usually we're presented with what the deficiencies are with the machine, and that's great. We know we need to fix them, but know what the machine does well and what's important with that. So we had a machine that we were doing, and really, this was an extremely hot furnace. And if you open any really hot furnace up to air, it's just going to crumble the insulation. Mm-hmm. And so they were trying to increase the life of the insulation in this furnace. And so they're like, all right, we want to change our process. And the main thing we want to focus on is the time that this furnace is open. And the barrel can be over here. It's okay. And, just get this open, get the barrel out, close it. And I remember, and it's one of those things you remember later on. I even asked him, like, is that barrel going to be okay just sitting over there? They're like, oh yeah, it won't be for that long. But in this case, what it was we were heating this barrel up that had this molten material in it. And it was a hardened inlay on it. So after that, you spin it really fast to make the, centrifugal force all that liquid out. Well, while it sat there waiting for us to close the furnace, it started to solidify and end up with porosity or little bits of air bubbles in it. So we had a furnace that would last 3 times as long and couldn't produce a good part. And so, and that was one of those, it's like after that, in hindsight, that was a really costly, improvement project. It was really, we really struggled with the modifications we made to get it to where it was to start with.
Mm-hmm. You had to slow it down to, I guess, go back to the original spec, so to speak.
We kind of did this football handoff maneuver with the barrel. It was like, kick the barrel out, throw it this way, and then close the furnace while it's rolling over, and then spin around and knock it on the rest of the way. It was bizarre in the end, but but yes. And in that case, I honestly though, I didn't ask the right question, but they kind of said, "Oh no, it shouldn't bother it." I guess at that point we should have realized I didn't know enough again at that point about metallurgy. And now, if anybody ever asked me can you do something that would make that something be in that cooling process longer, I'd be like, nah, I know it needs to go over there, but I didn't know any better though.
Yeah. And I was gonna say, like, that's an interesting component again of automation engineering where you really need to spend the time, I think, like understanding the process, but you also need to have someone who can explain it really well, because I find, in case of those, I would say like high pressure retrofits where you have to fix something or upgrade something, there's just not enough time baked in, I would say, like on the front end to understand the process really well. And that's what, like, I've been in those situations multiple times, and the same could be said also with like very old machinery that you all of a sudden upgrade to the latest and greatest, and you have these 3 millisecond scan times versus that like camshaft that used to run like 1 revolution every like 10 seconds. And so it becomes, there's a lot of like really strange issues, and I'm sure, Tim, you've seen a fair share of these, but it's not, I would say, like one-to-one transitions, or they're not as easy as sometimes even the OEMs themselves make it seem to be, so to speak.
Well, I think a lot of manufacturers would dislike me making this statement, but you would be surprised the processes out there that people really don't know how work. Like even on the engineering level, absolutely no. And I'll go ahead and call it out. The wastewater industry is the worst. We call it hand grenade chemistry. We're gonna throw, just get about that much in it, and that ought to work. It's like there's no math behind it. They're kind of looking over, no, it needs a little bit more. And there's a lot of process. Or somebody developed a process 40 years ago, and they are long retired. And we know as long as we follow these things right here, everything's going to come out fine. But nobody actually knows why things work. Right. And so, all of a sudden, and that's a huge issue with what I would call more of the modernization, where we're trying to add something into a process. And all of a sudden we upset a process that has worked for, ever. And it's like, well, how does this work exactly? and nobody knows. It's just like, well, that's the SOP. That's what we do, and it'll work. So, well, not anymore.